Yeah,
Cool.
all the Arch Linux tabs.
Right.
I was telling you before, like I've been installing Arch Linux, and it's one of those beautiful experiences because it just highlights all the things that you don't know. Like, it's considered this do-it-yourself Linux distribution,
Okay.
this do-it-yourself operating system as a whole. So you essentially have to configure everything. Yeah, like they have an installer, right? But okay, like for those that don't know, the whole process in general of creating a Linux-based system on your computer is you have to rip off the current operating system, boot from some sort of bootable media like a USB drive, and then configure and override everything that way. That consists of like handling all the disk partitions, mounting file systems, like all that stuff happens. But if you're doing it with like Ubuntu, which is what I've been using for a long time, then you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So the most you have to worry about is like selecting the drive and saying, hey, do I want to overwrite it completely or not? And filling out what user you'll have there.
Okay.
There's kind of a similar thing with the Arch installer, but it's a script you run. And it's fine. It does fine. But the recommended way of installing Arch is actually manually going through configuring each disk partition, manually mounting the file system, which means you have to know like what file system you even want compared to others and stuff. And maybe you do know those things, but like I've had to partition disks a handful of times throughout my career, but I didn't need to know anything near the depth I needed to know to do it with Arch, just as one example.
What do you find is the purpose in this added control of customization? Is it more power? Does it allow you to save space, or what value does it present to go through these things manually? Because I'd assume you'd have the option to leave certain things or change certain things moving forward with it.
Yeah, you have everything under your control. I think it's one of the few operating systems. First of all, I think you kind of got to understand the culture behind Arch. Like,
Okay.
we're 10 levels deep of nerd when you get to Arch users.
Yeah.
Like, very few people will ever get off their Windows or Mac machine
Like me.
and install another operating system and use it anyway, right? That's one level. Then you have the next level of nerd, which is, okay, that person, out of that group of people, very few of them will actually go through the process of installing Arch. The benefit is you get to understand the things that are working at a low level that you would not understand otherwise.
Okay.
So it removes a lot of abstraction. You get a lot more of an understanding of how an operating system works as a whole. How little things, like how fonts work. How, like right now I'm just going through installing the fonts that I want, which is normal for the most part, but then you get to a certain depth and like now you have to understand what Xterm actually is and what the window manager is and how terminal emulation works more. And their documentation, Arch's documentation is fantastic. So like that's kind of the benefit you get out of it. It's just a more low level understanding.
Gotcha.
Like I'm constantly pursuing right to understanding like assembly. That's the goal. Like I want to understand assembly and then up. Right now I'm kind of in like the C space.
Yeah.
Which is cool. And a lot of people in the C space, they maybe won't mess with Arch. But if you just have that natural curiosity to want to know how an operating system works, Arch puts so much more in your hands than other distributions. And one of their core mantras is like, we're not building this to try and have a lot of people use it.
I was just about to ask
like,
something similar.
Like we're building this for the people that use it, that will use it.
For the culture.
Yeah,
For them deep
it's
space
not.
nerds.
No one cares about people, and the whole culture around like, if you want to know how something works, it's available to you. Read the manual.
Exactly.
Like, read the freaking manual.
Because I was gonna ask, this isn't something, if you were, let's say, starting your own company that would need to take place or take use of a product like this. That's probably not something that you would spit out to a large group of people, because now you have different individual configurations and creations that could lead to a multitude of different machines effectively for people. opposed to a out of the box solution like Ubuntu. That's just like, hey, you drop it, it has what you need. There's configuration and customization that you can make, but you can kind of pass it out. This is for the personal, the interpersonal change of your machine, how you want to configure it, how you want to understand it, to give yourself a deeper understanding from what I take.
Well, kind of and kind of not. Like, let's take Ubuntu, for example. I love Ubuntu, but there's a lot of stuff installed on it that you don't need, that you would rip off in the case of actually deploying a production application.
Okay.
So that's the catch-22 is like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff on there that you kind of would need, and that's good. And there's a lot of stuff on there that you wouldn't. And then a lot of stuff that you still have to configure anyway to be able to use that in production.
Understood.
So with Arch, it's just, hey, I only have on here what I know is on here, and I can secure and configure my system exactly the way I can. I think Arch is a really good candidate for production servers. And a lot of people do run production servers with Arch, but is it even top 3? I don't know. Like, you probably would, if you're in an enterprise, you'd probably use Red Hat, or, you know, if you wanted to go with the open source version like CentOS or something like that. Ubuntu is fine. Like, there's a ton of people running production servers using Ubuntu. So it's not that it's not. I definitely think it's in the category of a production grade usable thing. You just have to know more about how stuff works.
Copy.
The stuff that you kind of have to learn anyway, if you're really going to run stuff in production. But as a personal user, there are things that you don't need to, like, you wouldn't need to know. It just gives you more. It gives you more control overall. That's my initial impression, because I've I've kind of installed it, uninstalled it, erased everything. I'm on my 3rd or 4th iteration of that. So I think the principles that Arch promotes around security, best practices, how to even manage a system in general, I think are really good.
Copy.
Anyway.
Well, tell the people what sparked your thought and interest, or your deep dive into this technology.
Yeah, my rabbit hole in Arch. I don't know if you're familiar with the whole Arch subculture too. Like,
absolutely not.
It's basically like Arch. One of the best things about using Arch is that you say, I use Arch.
Yeah. Okay. It's just like
similar to Rust.
Using VI.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, you guys have your code editors. No,
yeah.
Go straight out the terminal, bud.
It's similar to like Rust. People who write Rust code is a similar thing. Like, oh, I'm writing in Rust, and it's just this like, oh, cool thing. Like, you have to be this very
you guys like the
technical
hipsters
person.
Of tech. It's like the hipster wants everybody to know he has a vintage lunchbox.
I think all the hipsters are categorized as JS devs. Like,
okay.
Like, the subculture views like JavaScript, VS Code. They call them soy devs. Like,
soy devs.
Yeah, like a soy latte.
Yeah.
Developer. Yeah.
That's
they call them soy
sad.
devs.
There's other implications that come with that, but that's
none of these things are like valid or whatever, but it's the culture.
That's the culture.
Yeah, it's the culture.
Yeah.
So then you have the weird like Arch and Vim users.
Yeah.
Like, Vim is in there.
Okay.
As far as like I use Vim all the time, but I never use Arch.
Yeah.
But I think in the like YouTube sphere of things, like if you use Vim, you're using Arch, and it's like a whole thing. Anyway, it's nonsense largely. I say if you're a dev and you're interested in it, even if you're a JavaScript dev and you want to install Arch, like, do it. It's fine. It's fun. You can learn different things. But what got me interested was I was at Open Source Summit in Vancouver, and I had to speak there. And so you're there, you're looking at different talks, you're talking to different people, and I just came across more and more Arch information. I've been seeing it a lot in YouTube videos that I've been enjoying, and it's been in the back of my mind for some years now. I've just wanted to mess around, just haven't had time. So I've been playing Zelda.
Okay.
Yeah, the new Zelda. So I put that down, and I was like, let me mess with Arch a little bit. And I just went down this rabbit hole. It's been nuts. But that's the kind of the nice thing I think about going to these conferences is you're exposed to different people, different technologies, different approaches to specific problems that are really nice.
Yeah.
And I got sick of, I don't know, I keep this laptop for those, I keep this laptop. It's a Lenovo ThinkPad T430. You can get it for like $200. And its sole purpose is to like meet my Linux whims. Like, I just rip off everything and reinstall everything as much as I want.
Makes sense.
And it does great. And it teaches you a lot of things. Like I tweeted about it the other day, just like some of the specific things that you learn just by doing these experiments.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know we wanted to talk about like conferences. We want to talk a little bit about Agile. We didn't say the introduction. So hi everybody. I'm Gerald. This is Corey, and we're going to be talking about tech like we've been doing.
That's the plan. Episode 8, baby.
Episode 8. We took last week off, which is why we don't have the Memorial Day episode, but we'll be right back this next week. That was because I had to go to Austin, Texas for another
I was just about to ask
conference.
Exactly it was. But. So as a whole, we talked about Arch. Was there anything else that was sparked as a result of you being there? Any conversations, cool things you saw being built that you might want to be a part of, or keep an eye on moving forward?
I saw one talk in the IoT space.
Okay.
That I thought was kind of interesting. It was, I know Intel was part of it, and then I can't remember the other company. But they were, brings back like IoT Intel memories.
Indeed.
But they were building all of these edge systems, edge devices, and compiling all this data. And it was nice just to be like re-exposed and we re-brought into IoT, because I still think that's where things are and where they're going to be for a long time.
Absolutely.
And it presents some really interesting challenges around just data in general. Like how do we there's so much more data now.
Exactly.
So how do we manage it? How do we work with it?
And for those of our more casual listeners, those who might be a little newer to tech, IoT meaning Internet of Things. We'll bring back another previous segment. If you had to explain Internet of Things to a person who had never heard of it before, how would you take a person there? Yeah, on the spot.
Yeah. No, this is a good one. I think that the simplest way to explain it is instead of just your phone and your computer being connected to the internet, everything around you in some way has a connection to the internet. Whether that be this plant right here, or the obvious examples are if you have an Alexa of some sort, or any of the Amazon devices that are Alexa enabled, the Google devices that are smart devices enabled that are meant to listen and act and behave, like light bulbs, right? You get smart light bulbs that are connected to via a hub and allows you control over these things. Exactly. These are common examples, I think, of Internet of Things, but then it goes to a next level of how do you apply this technology in companies to provide value for people. And I always like the kind of examples of, oh, hey, I'm a truck driver, I'm delivering food of some sort. I have devices in the truck bed that can tell me if, the milk has spoiled or has got below a certain temperature and now isn't good enough to be put in stores and meets regulations and, different type of farming equipment and things like that, to get more data about the growing process and how things work, like these tiny little devices that now you can place all around. Yeah,
that's exactly what I was thinking. And it's funny enough because when you said the plant, I was like, what are you talking? But you're right, because my mind was the Internet of Things is a connection of objects and devices that are not typically connected to the internet in a way to receive data to make decisions on moving forward. And even when I look at the definition here, it's the interconnection via the Internet of computing devices embedded in everyday objects, enabling them to send and receive data. So you kind of gave an example of something that a person might see in their everyday life of IoT, depending on how they work. And with the Open Source Summit, make sure I'm getting that correct.
Yeah.
That conference you just went to, did you find that a lot of talks were centered around that, or Because I feel like in our previous position, that which why we like kind of chuckled and like working with IoT, whether it's things like thermostats or other stuff that we were able to kind of mess around with. When you get to open source code, people are just finding everyday things that they interact with, seeing how they can kind of get into interaction with them, and then putting out forth product that maybe can scale into something different. So when you talk about this conference, IoT was automatically the first thing that jumped off the board in my mind because of how many different applications a person could take and just kind of give out so that other people could build on top of it.
Yeah. I kind of go into this whole different weird space when I think about IoT. Like, it just makes my mind think very differently about like interacting with the physical world in a very different way. Like if you think about the future where stuff may go around augmented reality, the ability to kind of see digital things in the space in which we're seeing each other right now, or virtual reality, putting something on and becoming immersed into a different environment that is different than the environment we're currently in. Both of those spaces, I think, are heavily supported by the concepts of IoT, like where it can go. Because I envision walking into a room and having digital interfaces for all the things that I think are important.
Yeah.
Like I have this 3D printer over here. Okay, that's internet connected. Now I can 3D print and fabricate different things via my computer, download it, have it print something in real life. That thing in and of itself can become something intelligent.
Yeah.
Like a module in and of itself. Think about all the sensors you even have available. Like this, I said the plant, because I could put a sensor on this plant that tells me the CO2 levels in this room and now have that feedback into my hub.
And it allows you to make choices and decisions based on it. Like I think about, we have you talked about the smart bulbs. I've been doing a lot of research and like focus into like my sleep patterns and the blue light I receive. And I have it so that I'm typically not in my bedroom between the hours of 4 and 9 o'clock. But at 8:30 every single night, the light changes without me having to do it. So that when I walk into my bedroom later in the night to start my nightly routine, start getting ready, I don't have to remember to turn these lights to a different hue that helps my sleep. But it's already there. The light shuts off at a specific time, and it allows me to make decisions and to move forward based on these other processes that I no longer have to do. It's automated. I remember we were working on a project, or at least discussing it because somebody had brought it to us in regards to video cameras and school buses. And how, of course, the reason it came to us is because there was a lot of issues with bus drivers berating and doing wild things to children while on a school bus. And in reverse. I remember being on that school bus and kids doing ridiculous stuff while they're on that school bus. So the video camera, they feel, protects both the bus driver, the bus company, and the students from any ill harm.
Bro, did you see the bus that literally, I just saw this today. It was a bus driver who was telling kids to sit down. They weren't sitting down. And so he brake checked them, Now, I don't know about you all. I don't know about anyone in the audience, but I've been brake checked by a bus driver tons of times.
Many times.
Growing up.
With no phones.
There was like 30 misdemeanor counts of child abuse.
Oh.
Like, for brake checking.
You can't do that.
Yeah, I get it. You shouldn't do that.
You can't do that.
You shouldn't do it. He literally was like, you want to see how dangerous this is? And he braked it, but they had the video camera of him. Braked it, and the kid's like, boof.
And he knows he can't do that.
Yo, that was wild. Because you know how many bus drivers wouldn't exist?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I'd have been walking to school. Like, they'd have fired all my bus drivers.
All the bus drivers.
Yeah.
All the bus drivers would be gone. And I get that's a difficult thing because, the kid, they're not listening.
No.
No,
we were not. We were throwing
that was wild. I don't know, like,
we were doing crazy
someone drop a comment if, you find that specific article.
Yeah, facts.
Because I hope that it was just wrong social media, like, exaggerating things. 30 counts.
30 counts. That's kind of crazy.
Of misdemeanor child abuse.
Or endangerment.
Like, that's wild.
You're going to wait for quite some time.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so now what happens? Like he actually had to step on the brakes in the emergency situation.
Well,
The kid's is standing up, and then he's hurt now, or she's hurt now. What happens?
they're still going after the bus driver.
Oh, 100%.
They're still going after the bus driver in that situation.
But he's like,
But now,
I feel like he's trying to prevent this.
No one got hurt in the process, or quote unquote, in the process of this brake check. But like you said, in the event of emergency, someone's gonna get hurt. But yeah, but that's
Well, maybe he braked fast enough, and the accident didn't happen.
but still,
But because you
Johnny
were
goes
not in your seat, yeah, like
4 rows ahead.
because you're standing up.
Exactly.
So I understand. Okay, how many times has your parent
Oh,
brake checked you?
parent, no, older brother, many times.
Yeah, well, I can think. I've been brake checked. I've been
Yeah.
brake checked by all of my family members. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure the vast majority of them. Oh, you don't have your seatbelt on? Brake check.
Yeah.
And you're in the car.
So your heart drop into your stomach real quick.
Like that's wild to me.
Yeah, that's
That's,
not.
yo,
that's
I don't want any job
No,
where you have to do anything for children.
and that's becoming more of a thing. So
That's terrifying.
you look at the ambiguity of our upbringing, and all the stuff we saw on that school bus that there just was not a phone to like record. Yeah. How many times did I just randomly get off at somebody else's stop, and I eventually made my way home, but I'm just doing whatever I want to do along the time. To the point of that video camera, if they're matching that data with GPS, if they're matching that data with timestamps, and they're matching facial recognition to these kids on the bus, I know when Johnny got off at 1st Street, and that's Johnny stop. But I also know if Johnny got off at 5th Street because he messed with that little girl, and now when they go, hey, where's Johnny? We can track down where Johnny last was.
Yeah.
So it's these types of, it's multiple points of data being able to point to one solution that come as a result of it. It's the same thing that happens in these schools, to where we see like I don't know how many times I got yelled and cussed at by teachers and stuff. Like they just yelling at the whole classroom. We just kind of laughed at it.
They're not dealing with none of that no more.
Oh, you can't.
I mean, yeah, kids just whipping out their phones. And
Absolutely.
I think it's good because it holds a different level of accountability. I also think that these school employees have to deal with a lot. Like, the bus driver thing, what I feel like he probably just should have done is noted who was standing up after the first or second warning. You should know the kids that you're transporting, and then you're reporting them. That's the only thing you can really do.
Yes, that is the.
That's the only thing you can do.
Clear and apparent. The only thing you can really.
You can't do nothing else.
You can't do nothing else.
You can't go and yoke a kid up.
Nope.
You can't do nothing like that.
Yeah.
You have to understand who these kids are on your bus.
Now, was that recorded by a
them.
kid or by another form of video?
It was recorded by like the bus video, I think.
Okay, yeah,
because
the
angle was looking.
If he didn't know Susie had her phone out, he brake checked him, and he's an idiot for knowing that there's a camera on the bus.
Yeah, I think there was because the angle was like up, like it was up top, looking down. So I think it didn't look like someone just had their phone out.
Yeah, give him a chair. He's an idiot for just not.
That's tough.
It's
like,
high stress.
I hope that they tell bus drivers that. Like, I just hope they. I would think, because I haven't been in school. My daughter's too young for school.
My pops was a bus driver. There's been like, not I want to say full cameras on these buses since I was in high school, but like some sort of like grainy CCTV style video on these buses for a decade.
Yeah.
He knew.
Okay.
But it's a high stress situation. These kids are hopped up on juices and snacks from school, going absolutely crazy and yelling. It's probably not the first time he done had to tell Johnny to sit down. It's a high stress situation.
As a parent, I would be upset. Like from the parent's perspective, if my kid comes off and like they have a bruise or something because they were brake checked by a bus driver, I'm gonna be upset.
Especially
but from the other
perspective,
exactly. But even if they were, keep it hot. You're still gonna be upset.
Yeah.
Like
not my baby.
Who is this bus driver? Brake check it. Like, bro, get the kid to school. But then on the other side.
Yeah. No.
I understand how that would be a stressful situation.
The non-parent here.
Yeah, like taking my parent cap off and saying, yo, these bad little kids.
Yeah, they deserved it. Not
listening. No one died.
No.
Like, they got what? They got a little bump because it was a simulation of a real situation.
I mean, I don't really know what you want to do when you don't put seatbelts on school buses. But
yeah, that's a whole other thing.
facts.
Because then you got to have people get on and make sure the kids are in their seatbelts. And
Well,
then,
I feel like we
and
know
then
very
was
quickly.
a car crash, and then you got to evacuate. You got to get everyone out there.
Also,
like,
is that why they don't have them?
I have no idea why they don't
figure
have
that
them.
out later.
No clue. This is a whole like exposure to things I don't know.
Facts.
I don't know how the school bus system works. Anyway, that was an IoT rant turned like bus conversation.
Yeah.
But that was the thing I learned today.
To the point of your conference.
Yeah.
Of course, your position within your company lends you to speaking at more conferences, being invited to speak at conferences. But give the people a little rundown on what it's like to be in that situation as a presenter, as a speaker. I've seen you do the little quaint corner table talk with just a few people interested in the situation. Mm-hmm. I've seen you on the stage with the black turtleneck and jeans, Steve Jobs. Bam!
I don't think I've ever worn a turtleneck, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
The same, but how does your and I'll ask the second question afterwards, but just to put it on your mind, does your preparation vary depending on the type of speaking engagement you have? But to start, what's it like being a person asked to present?
So I used to look at folks that gave talks at conferences and be like, man, I wonder how they even get into that. Now being into it, a talk is a lot of work. Like if you're going to try and give a good conference talk, it takes a lot of preparation. Now, if it's a talk I've already given, because like working as a developer advocate, I have talks that are in my bag.
Yeah.
So I may have 3 talks. If I submit, so they have what's called call for papers. Mm-hmm. So you can go to different sites and apply to give talks, or you get invited to give talks. Most of the talks I go to, I've been invited. But I need to submit more. I just don't. But the normal process is you submit, call for papers for a specific conference that you want. Mm-hmm. And then you prepare that talk. You get accepted, you have to prepare and go. Now, there's different types of talks, right? So if you're doing a keynote, that's on kind of the big stage in front of everybody at the beginning, or, when they gather everyone into the room, usually at the beginning of the conference or at the end of the conference.
Okay.
And then they have breakout rooms where they have smaller stages. In the really big conferences, they'll have like still big room, smaller stages, and then like workshop level kind of smaller stages. And so you could do any of those. Okay. Right? If you're submitting for a talk, they may ask you or put you in any of those situations. Overall, I'd say the experience is it's in general a lot of preparation, and this is a talk you've already had prepared on hand. And even then, there's still preparation to tweak that talk for the specific conference and the audience that you're going towards.
What's it like? Let's say it's a 3-day conference, like Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Mm-hmm. And you don't speak till Saturday, but they've invited you to all 3 days. Or you speak on Thursday, but they want you there all weekend. Is that weird? Like, just like, hey, man, I saw your talk on Thursday.
So, honestly, it varies. Like, if I get invited, it's a conference I'm actually like really interested in, which is the vast majority of them. I don't really like speaking at conferences I'm not interested in. I'll go whenever it first starts, and I'll actually stay. I'll attend the talks. If I have some final preparation to do, I'll use some of that time to do that, whether that be like editing some slides or whatever. Everyone says you should be done before,
I agree.
way before. I just, whatever. It doesn't end up happening a lot of the time. So I'm usually there like, oh, I kind of like this. I want to change this around a little bit. And then I call it like a day before my talk. I won't make any more changes. I'll just kind of like practice that refined version. But while I'm there, I'll get ideas and mess with stuff and add stuff. I don't usually do like tweak the technical demo too much at that point. That makes sense. The technical demo, like if I'm walking through code and stuff, that stuff is pretty finalized. Like I'm not really changing that. What I'm changing more so is the presentation, how I'm showing things. But I'll attend usually all the days. Now there's someone where I won't. Like I'll fly in that day.
Get my talk,
and I'll fly in that night or fly out that next morning usually. and that's fine too. Like, you really just have to check in for AV, audio and visual. Like they mic you up and
Yeah.
you test everything. Usually I'll try to be there like an hour before my talk at the latest. But that how it usually works out is I'm there all day already.
Exactly.
I kind of just migrate towards where my room is going to be. If I'm there the first day, usually I'll just find where my room is on the schedule because they have the schedule released already. And I'll just kind of look around and see what it is, talk to the audio folks, kind of see how stuff works. You talk to the people organizing it. They'll give you basic instructions. And they also have a speaker room usually on facility so that you can go in there and do stuff you need to do.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's interesting because I've been on the board to throw a conference.
Nice.
Yeah, but it was like it was what was supposed to be a very large in-person conference, and we started planning that around late January, February of 2020, and then of course, it wasn't none of that. Yeah. So we had to go fully virtual. But thanks to some of the restrictions raising or lightening, we were able to still do it in person. So it wasn't like it was 2 days of just straight Zoom appearances. We had an in-person, in-studio where we were streaming out to the thousands of people that joined. I was over the volunteers and ended up having to fill in for some other parts. But looking at one of the other board members who was handling the speakers, it's like Are you aware of a speaker, as a speaker, like when other people are in and out of the lineup, unless maybe they might ask you to shift, or they might like see a change in the scheduling
in a virtual conference,
any type of conference?
You're aware of the schedule. Like I'm aware of the schedule, who's kind of before me, after me, what room I'm in, and who's coming before me.
Yeah,
that's from the perspective of me going as a speaker giving a talk. But then like also as a weird part of my role as a DA is helping to run these conferences. Yeah. My role in that is I'll either like MC like for our HashiConf.
I was just about to ask. Like next HashiConf is when? Did you
I want to say October.
October.
No, we have Hashi Days, which is actually in a couple weeks.
Copy.
We have those all over, I think, all over Europe. So it's kind of like our HashiConf Europe version, except we're doing it in different cities, which is pretty cool. I'm just not going to be in town, or else I would probably be in Europe in the next couple weeks. But the thing that's weird about the difference between running a virtual conference and an in-person conference is the emceeing is like I know who's up. If I'm emceeing, I know everyone that's coming through.
Exactly.
Like I know everyone. I know their topic. I don't speak before you even find out if you're emceeing. As a DA, I'm evaluating talks. Like I'm going through. I may have like if you're practicing your talk, I may be one of the people that if it's a technical portion or they have a very technical piece,
go through the validity.
Then they may come have me go and validate that stuff. So they have like teams of people. Like I'm not the only DA. They have teams of people that go through and validate this material.
You know, it's so interesting because in the Agile space, there isn't much verification that we can oftentimes do, right? Because if it's a statistical talk, which will be the closest we get to a technical talk, it'll be, hey, I worked at company X. We decided to put in these changes. Although the Garys of our company resisted it, we saw 15% change. And I'm like, dude, that company's in Switzerland. Like, how do I know that he's telling the truth about this 15% change? So it's interesting for me to hear that you guys are actually like verifying and making sure the claims of the tech that's going to be supported, whether it's like the open source things or new add-ins to the Hashi stack and the different programs you have available for use, that, hey, we need to verify that these things work before. Because I know, because I've watched you. I remember when we went to Token Fest. And we were watching some demo on some coin, and they were talking about like the white paper behind it and the different, and I could tell that you had like your antennas up. Yeah. And before we could even like, hey man, you know what you want to eat? You're like on the computer looking through, how can I download? How can I'm just like, so I can imagine that if somebody just came with some wacky ideas and stuff, that you should probably like verify it before, so people aren't just trying to.
If the audience is technical, they're gonna call you so fast. Like you'll be called out, and people will like, if it's really that bad and you're just wrong,
Yeah.
people will just walk out.
I'm like,
They'll walk out and they'll like you get a reputation. Now it's not if you're newer, right? Like if it's a newer talk or if it's a high visibility talk, right? Like there's we give a different level of scrutiny to like a keynote talk or
Absolutely.
a really big kind of even like breakout session talk
yeah.
to like a very small talk or like a break kind of like breakout session, but it's only 15 people type level talk. Those level talks, they may, you're allowed some creative liberties. We review the high level material. As long as nothing sounds completely nonsense, then great.
Exactly.
But if it's like a big technical thing, our audience is very technical.
Exactly.
Like they're going to know. And just like in that situation, I think I'm remembering it, and they were like spouting nonsense. And I remember like actually getting in and messing with it while they were talking. I'm like, none of this stuff works. Like, none of this stuff makes sense or works. And that's the problem you run into when you have a technical audience is they're gonna hold you accountable
Exactly.
for what you're saying. So we try to we have to do that because HashiCorp as a whole has a reputation around its technical products, and then whoever we allow to come in, they also have a reputation. Now that varies too, though, because an individual will gain a reputation in the technical conference circuit.
True. Very true.
Right? So, like one of my colleagues, she's really senior in the conference space. She has a big reputation in the conference space. She gets pulled in a lot. And someone like that is going to go under maybe a little less scrutiny.
Yeah.
In a lot of conferences. Like there's some conferences where they're still going to scrutinize heavily.
Yeah.
But once you get that reputation,
This person.
a lot of people are
they're
just
talking
kind of
about.
excited for you to come.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you
That
got to
makes
build that over time. You kind of got to
Yeah.
grind that out a little bit.
Do you find that the brands and companies that a person may work for can at times overshadow who the person is?
Yeah.
Like, because that's something that I feel like would be a true concern. If you have a very large, maybe it's a startup that's trailblazing, or just like one of the FANG companies, like, oh, this dude's like, there's always some crazy title, like the deputy marketing Terraform specialist guy.
Oh,
And
wow.
you start throwing
that's a
stuff, and
title.
you're like, oh, well, he does that at Facebook. Oh, he does that at Meta. Oh, yeah, we got to go figure this out. I need to go hear this, and you end up in that situation.
Reputation, it goes both ways. So there's the side that you said, which is a company can overshadow you, and you can have the connotations of that company thrust on you, even though you may not agree with it. So like the Google approach to a specific problem may be to use Google Cloud Service to solve this problem in this very specific way. In reality, like with all these problems, there's at least 10 to 100 different ways to solve that problem. And that individual might feel like this way over here for this specific use case makes more sense. Now, for a company like Google, who is smart, I think they're not going to get on that person for showing a different approach, because they realize there's 100 different ways to do this. And in the context of that talk, it may make sense to highlight what that person's highlighting. But in other contexts, it may not make
Stop
sense.
staring customers away from our products.
Yeah. In other
Or
situations,
else.
they may be like, no, that's not done. That's not done here. Like,
Don't do that thing.
you're at a Google Cloud conference, like, and we want you to do a Google Cloud talk, which is fine. Like, I'll have that. People that are in the conference circuit understand that as well. Like, I'm not gonna, and I'm just newer into this conference circuit. I've only been doing this stuff for like a year, and I'm still learning. But I know if I'm going to like GitHub Universe, that certain topics are going to be more received better than pitching that same topic at an AWS conference or a
that
Google
makes
Cloud
sense.
conference. Like, I'll probably be speaking more about CI/CD and things like that at GitHub. And at AWS, I may be highlighting some AWS services specifically and using those things together to do something specific that I could have done this other way as well. Like, you just kind of got to be aware. And then people will see, oh, he's from HashiCorp, right? So if I put all of the HashiCorp tools in my talk, they may think that I'm just trying to pitch HashiCorp.
Yeah.
So that's not the case. So you got to learn how to talk about stuff at the high level for the audience that you're talking to when you're pitching the CFP in and of itself.
Gotcha.
Anyway, it's a whole thing.
No, that's real.
Yeah.
How would you recommend to maybe somebody who wants to get started in the conference space?
Check out a site like papercall.io. They have all the CFPs on there. Like you can just apply on there for different conferences. Submit a conference, like come up with an idea. If there's a conference that's interested in, if you're doing something at work that is using the tools that this conference represents, like if you, I'm using GitHub Actions to do this really cool thing. Like GitHub Universe, I think they just closed their CFP, but they do it every year. They open it up. But submit a talk, and you'd be surprised. A lot of times they'll pick you up and they'll throw you in a session. So I don't even think people know. Like I didn't know that these sites existed before a year ago. I didn't know when I got into this role, and my boss told me, "Oh, go to Paper Call." I had no idea, and I'd already spoken at conferences. So yeah. I started at user groups and stuff like that. The smaller level conferences, like the local stuff, they'll pick you up a lot faster than like a lot of the big conferences. So get some warm-ups. A lot of times those are only in front of like 10, 20 people, maybe up to like 50 people max. So do the small local conferences, local user groups in your state. Submit talks, like if you're using stuff that's relevant to what they're talking about. It's a lot easier to get into there, for sure.
That makes sense. Yeah, I just found this Pitt Agile gathering in September.
Yeah.
And, we talked about me doing a conference last year, and I checked off the thing on the list before that. So I should probably pull that back into my list of goals for this year. So
yeah, I think it's good to try and at least, even if you're not in the big conference scene heavy, try and give 1 or 2 talks a year.
Well, that's my bag. Education is, I personally feel that education is the key to life, but more or less the key to scaling, right? I even, I remember I was talking to my wife about this, to where the ability to scale yourself or your business is always going to be the large defining factor of how large and how much revenue you can drive through that business. If I'm the only person who knows how to do this thing, my time and energy will always be capped. But if I can teach other people how to do it, then I can grow it exponentially with no cap. It's the same thing if there's a young woman I know, she's a hairstylist. So as a hairstylist, I got 8 hours in my day, or 10 hours, depending on how much I'm working. I got 5 days I'm working, I got 2 off. I'm capped. But she has a business to where she teaches others how to do the same techniques, all the same things, and that caps it out to where that's probably, if my guess is probably bringing her more money, because more people want to enter the field than doing the hair itself. So that's kind of how I've seen in tech as well. It's not necessarily your ceiling your ceiling will always be reached by a salary you can pull into a company. But if you're creating content, if you're creating videos, if you're doing other stuff of that nature, that'll drive eyes to the work that you are capable of doing. It'll drive revenue, of course, in because people are paying for the content, different things of that nature. So this is interesting.
No, it is. I love the education space. I get torn between like selling it and giving it away, which is why I like YouTube, because it allows you to work towards a model where you're getting paid, but people still have access to the information for free. Right. And that's really a big reason why I push towards this versus making courses or just focusing on teaching boot camps. Not that like I would never make a course or that I would never teach a boot camp, because I would, and I like doing those things, and they all have their place. But if I can create information for people that is going to bring them value, and I can be a part of a system that can give it away for free, and I can still get compensated, but it's not from those people who need the information the most, like that's the best of all worlds.
Do you remember, off chance, when we were doing boot camps, what the admission fee was?
I think we were centering it towards people who had full-time jobs, so we made it part-time. Yeah. Which was like after work, I think, for like 3 or 4 hours. And it was only a couple weeks, I think. like 2 to 3
3 weeks
weeks.
tops.
And it was we made it $500.
$500. Yeah.
Because we found that was here's the weird thing about we're going to talk about.
No, because I remember because it was if it's too cheap.
We tried to give it away.
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember.
Here's was it like no, listen to this because this is a problem. We tried to give it away. Which we're like, look, we'll do this 3 to 4 hours with a group of people. We can get 10 people together. Like that was kind of the number, 5 to 10 people. If we can get 5 to 10 people together, me and this other person at the time, we're like, we'll just do it. We want people to learn. Mm-hmm. We'll extend our time. We did it, and nobody showed up, and nobody did the work. Mm-hmm. And it was like, wow. Like they had someone between me and this other guy,
so much knowledge,
had 30 years of experience giving it to you for free. Mm-hmm. And they said, yeah, whatever, no thank you. As soon as we put $500 on it, everyone did the work.
That 100% completion percentage.
Everyone did the work, and they saw more value in it.
Yeah.
And it was really me and this guy. We had this discussion so much because it was like we both kind of agree. Like if you can give it away for free, I want to because we genuinely just want to help people progress in this space.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't. So we try to be like, well, what's the least amount of money we can charge? Well, people will care.
Exactly. That's the reason that sparked the thought was with the YouTube stuff, where I'm just like, even if you put a course together and you just made it private on YouTube and just said, hey, I got a course, $10, I'll send you a link. There are people who would feel like that information is not worth $10, right? But if you told somebody, hey, for 2 weeks, I'm going to go through this course with you for $500 and I'll be here to answer questions and talk to you. Yeah. People would take like the Futurama meme, take my money. That's just how it happens.
It's crazy. Yeah. And people ended up, it looked like people would be willing to pay for something like that. A guided experience because it was me and the other teacher. And then it was... Well, multiple of them were just me at one point, but then but the one I'm talking about where we first charged was me and another teacher, and then we had 3 TAs so we tried to have one attendant for every like 5 people or something. Yep. It's crazy thinking back on it, but like we did it, and it was good, and people were learning, and they had access not just to the teachers, but they also had the TAs that would like give them more like focused help as well.
Yep.
And the TAs were able to escalate to us, and as if there was bigger questions, things like that. All that stuff was fantastic. Mm-hmm. Like I think that something like that makes a lot of sense because it gave people an introduction to. In that case, we were focused on like JavaScript web development, but we also did like introduction to computing, like very core concepts at the highest level you can get while getting as deep as you can in that period of time to understand the things that were going on. Now, it was a lot, but I think now looking back, something like that makes sense. Also, having something where at the end of this, you can decide what path you want to take.
Absolutely.
Would also be cool. Like, do you want to do web dev? Do you want to do mobile? Like, you know enough now to be able to choose and pursue further education. A bigger, better boot camp if you wanted to go that route, go more full time,
You realize that you do have a passion for this. A lot of people were just jumping into that boot camp because they heard, okay, there's money attached to this. And then they got into the boot camp and was just like, I hate this.
Yep.
Which is fine. And I don't believe that $500 is a crate. And this is not me speaking from the position and the hat I'm wearing currently. But even when I was first starting, I do believe that the information I was gathering to make that decision was worth $500.
Yeah.
So you might decide after the initial boot camp or hey, because I'm interested in this one thing, I already found myself looking it up after the boot camp's over. I already found myself on weekends when I have time just listening to videos on it. So now that my interest has been piqued, I can go the self-serve route. I don't even need the next boot camp. It's charging me $10,000. That was all right. So like to that point, I don't think people, and we purposely, I won't say we didn't do a good job. We didn't care to do a good job of making people aware of the difference between what we were handing them in a 2 to 3 week process for $500 versus what people are being handed in a 16-week, $10,000, $5,000.
It's way more than that now. It's like 15 to 20 racks.
I believe it.
Yeah.
But people, 500 is a lot. And it was just like, find me something comparable. I'm not, because typically you'll go to like a website for a boot camp or something and be like, here's us and our competitors and all the, I have my own job. I got my own family. This is, I want to say this is a gift because I'm asking for money back, but this is an extremely valuable product I'm giving to you for this. Yeah. And that boot camp got better every time we ran it because I was part of that first group that you were talking about where me and one other person barely got out of it as a result of it happening for free. Mm-hmm. And then there being the recorded videos and the documentation and the other stuff to go through it. I was just working off straight memory trying to get that project done in that first boot camp. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's huge because there's so much value, like we talked about last time, in, I don't want to say the hand holding, but the guided coursing. Yeah. Like I'm even realizing that as I'm running, like I'm starting to do like guided runs. Mm-hmm. And it's like weird.
Those are fun though.
Yeah. Exactly. And
they make it much more interesting.
So it means something, even if it's just through whatever the means it comes through. Mm-hmm. But maybe one day we'll do another boot camp. I don't know.
Yeah, we had a comment. Someone asked. Yeah. And I just was looking at the comment. Like they literally asked, "Do we teach boot camps?" And I was sitting there like, I'm not against it. I'm not against it. Mm-hmm. But the attitude we were bringing to it was like I said, how can we make them pay just enough to care? Yeah. Because you have to care to do this. You can't just...
And it's because life comes up. Like in that first boot camp, we had people who were just like, hey, man, I do like the information, but I got overtime this week. If I got to choose between feeding my family and my current job and what I hope my next job will be, I got to choose the current one. You can't just hope. Well, I was able to, but everybody can't just drop what you're doing at the moment. And it's not to say that people didn't want it. Sometimes stuff came up, but I can tell you what, when you got $500 attached to it, you might be able to try to beg and plead with your manager to get you out of work a little earlier because you have money attached to it. That's the attachment that comes alongside of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and we got better with each boot camp. You know, we did all the recordings. We gave people access to information. But you find, I think the thing that is the fear for me is because people will still be like, oh, they're trying to make money. Mm-hmm. And not that I'm against making money. Let me be very clear. I am perfectly okay with making money. The thing is, this is one of the least return on investment money-making opportunities that I have in my life right now, period.
But sometimes it's hard to see that from the other side.
You got to break down the math, okay? Mm-hmm. Like if I charge to go into a customer and consult, my charging rate is $500 an hour.
Believe it.
Okay? Now, that might not be, you might be like, oh, no, like, no, I'm telling you, like that, to go in and talk about the stuff that we're talking about
to
around like people's cloud stuff, like, and actually just to even consult on how to do it. Yeah. Without even actually having to do it. That's before we even do it. Yeah. So I'm not charging you $500 and then spending 30 hours a week. So I'm putting in 60 hours with you. Yep. I'm not doing that because I'm trying to make money.
And that's 60 hours of like instruction and assistance.
Yeah, like
we're not talking about putting together the programs, collecting the money, processing people, reconfirming, putting together the documentation so that you can make sure that the laptop your auntie left you will actually suffice and work, getting virtual machines downloaded, not all the pre-work we have to create to make sure the boot camp runs. Yeah. But people oftentimes, and that's not just an us thing, people oftentimes don't see the back end of the work that goes into it, and then they're very confused about why the end product is what the end product is, or what it costs. It's the same reason that person would say, well, $500 an hour for a consult. And it's like, yeah, but you don't understand what I had to go through to give you this information. Consulting is only consulting because I have information you don't, or I have viewpoint that you don't. So it's worth something.
It is. And it's difficult. It's a difficult balance to strike because I've also been in a situation where $500 makes or breaks
absolutely
a lot of things. So I get it. It's challenging. If you're not in a financial situation to do it, that makes sense. But if you're not in the financial position to do it, you may not be in the position to do it, period. Like, you may not be able to dedicate the time to do it anyway. And here's what's interesting, and you may remember, we let certain people that couldn't afford, we still let them audit the class.
That's against my better judgment.
We still let them be a part of it just to get the information.
Yeah.
Which ended up being a challenge and a mistake in and of itself. Absolutely. Because they wanted the same level of care and experience that the people who did pay into it got.
Exactly.
And it's just like, it's always difficult. Doing these things with people is always difficult. If I had to do it again, I would take one or two approaches. Like, either you got the full cloud approach where we have all these machines spun up in the cloud. Mm-hmm. And I like that approach. We can do that. We run it for a couple weeks. They, have to SSH in. Mm-hmm. But what I really like, right, is we get these friggin' T430s that are 180, $250 a pop. We put our operating system in there. We put the login on there, right? And then we send these out to everybody who's involved, and that's included in the price, even if it's not $500. Even if it's like, even if we count this as a cost of $250, if you can charge under $1,000, and you also get to keep this machine, and it's all like, it has the baseline configuration you need to do the course, I think that would be cool.
I agree.
But anyway, we'll talk about that at some point. I don't know. If you guys really want us to think about this more, comment.
Yeah.
If not, then I'm not gonna worry about it.
I'll say this to wrap us up on that subject, because it was something you said before we got into the how we would do it. If you don't have $500 to do the course, that's fine. But there's a difference between having $500 now, knowing that you want it and you can't afford it, and putting aside other things so that the next time the opportunity arises, you're prepared then. Of course, we already beat that into a pulp last podcast. Mm-hmm. But also, what it may mean is that you have to sacrifice other things. So we talked about sacrificing money so that later on you can have what you want for the opportunity. But maybe that means you have to sacrifice some of that attention because you can't afford in-person training. Mm-hmm. So now I got $15 for this Udemy course. That means I have to sacrifice my attention to pay attention. Now, If you put both those things in conjunction, by the time the $500 opportunity comes back again, now you're sitting there like, all right, I got 3 months of online instruction. I have my money to take this, and you're well ahead of the curve before you get here anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's just, I feel like oftentimes people will just, I guess it's not for me, and drop it. Yeah. And that's not a mentality that typically works forward into success.
Yeah. And I like the disclaimer too of like, we're very transparent about you can do this by yourself.
Yeah,
I don't have a problem with you doing this, but I would prefer everyone was capable to do it by themselves.
Right.
Here are all the Udemy courses. Like I said, spend $15 on a solid Udemy course. You can learn everything that you want to learn.
Yeah.
If you're saying I need a guided experience to kick me off and get me kick-started into this space, this was made for those people that were like, I get it. I got the Udemy course. I can go on YouTube. I get that. I can't do that on my own. Like, this is for them.
Yeah.
So that's fine. Just know if you're one of those people. If you come to me and you ask me, hey, should I take your bootcamp or should I just take this Udemy course? Bro, take the Udemy course. If you think you can do this by yourself.
If it's an option, take that option.
Do the thing. Like, dedicate a few hours a day, ideally, if you're really just getting into it. If you can dedicate 3 hours a day, fantastic. If you can't, dedicate 15 to 30 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. Do the courses, go through, listen to the information, then go back through and do the exercises. Like, every module, one module at a time, one video at a time. Listen, go back to the video. Say, okay, I want to be very clear about this instruction because there's a way to take a video course effectively. All right, are you ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Drive, let's go.
If you're taking a video course, watch the video first. Just watch it. Let's say it's 10 minutes. Don't type anything. Don't be on your computer don't try to follow along. Don't do nothing, okay? Like, this is for people who are just starting and trying to get good at video learning, okay? Watch the video all the way through. Then press play again on that same video. And that time, follow along and do the thing. This is a very tried and true tested way of taking video courses that helps you reaffirm the information as you're going on.
You can't do and pay attention at the same time. Like you can't try to copy the code. You'll end up, if you copy it well, you'll end up with the same thing they have on the screen and none of the knowledge of how to replicate it the next time.
Yeah. Now, one exception to that is, like, for me, if I'm generally kind of familiar with the topic, I'll do it at the same time. Like, I'll do it at the same time because I understand pieces already that are behind the scenes, and I can pick up and learn. And as you get better at it, you may be able to, but we're not talking about people that are advanced. We're talking about beginners. So as a beginner, watch the video once. Stop, okay, good. Watch it again, follow along. Do that for every course. So you're watching each video a minimum 2 times. And pause. Pause at each step. If you didn't understand what they just said, pause. Go back, re-listen to what they just said again. If you still don't understand it, pause. Look up the term they just said that you don't understand in another tab. Don't keep playing the video, pause the video, and look it up, right? Like, that is how you really get this stuff ingrained in your brain as a beginner who doesn't have this kind of, I'm just inclined to program. Right?
Got to build the foundation, man.
Yeah. Sorry, I just felt like people should know
that's really good advice. It's really good advice. Well, it's in regards to the conference, and we're at the hour mark. Any shout outs, anything interesting that you're looking to move forward with? I know we talked about the IoT and the Intel, but any more conferences you got scheduled?
No, I just had this internal conference, which is more so me working with our internal teams at Hashi to, like, better illustrate the value of our products for organizations. Because we have open source software, right, which is free for everyone to use, but it's more tailored towards an individual person. Then there's this whole other problem set of how do you use that software at the scale of an organization who has hundreds, if not thousands, of people working to solve that same problem. So, like, that's what I'm trying to help out with now, is how do you, because the value of open source is very easy to say, like, Terraform does this, Vault does that, like, all of our products does this thing. But how it changes how companies are able to accomplish work, which is also in I feel like a part of the whole Agile module, changing how we do work. And that's why I can't say I completely hate Agile. I just hate what it's become. I hate what it's become. I've told you this.
We'll jump into, we don't got to go deep right now.
Look, I hate that Agile has become just this other way of tracking people's performance and keeping them bogged down. It was like, oh man, it was like these corporations were like, oh, Agile, I guess we can't, get rid of it, so we got to figure out how to incorporate all our nonsense into it. That's the only part I hate about Agile. I do like the part about having to adapt how we do work. I think that that's important. I think a lot of the principles about how that work is accomplished together make sense. The black and white need for all of the rituals in every situation, I don't think that's necessarily a thing. But hey, that's a case-by-case basis, right? Like, I've seen many different teams work with many different types of Agile flavors where the frequency of a ritual is really the only thing I'm talking about. I'm not saying any of the individual rituals are completely unnecessary or wrong. I'm saying how frequently one ritual may happen per a specific Agile framework doesn't make sense sometimes.
Well, then the fault is not within the framework. The fault is within the practitioner. Because, I don't know if you remember this, but we had a team that wanted to go to 1 week sprints.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And his reasoning is so much. His reasoning was flawed, but came from a good place. If we have retros and plannings and refinements every week, we'll become better at it. Repetition breeds mastery. We'll become a really efficient team. And I'm like, dog, we don't have batch sizes small enough to make 1 week of work make sense. So to that point, let's
Did you say batch sizes? Batch sizes.
So the thought of batch sizes in Agile comes from lean manufacturing, right? Manufacturing plant, let's say, creates a certain piece that goes into a car. That piece comes of 3 different components. We could either only build the triangle of the one piece, or we can chop it up and build 1 piece, build 2 piece, build 3 piece, and assemble them at the end. Okay. And the process of splitting up your batch sizes in software, it's more like huge scale development. How do we chop up these smaller releases and features opposed to giving them one huge thing at the end of the quarter? So often Agile as a whole is based behind that. How do we chop down batch sizes or pieces of work so that we can quickly identify bottlenecks, in which case we know how to keep value flowing through the system? To your point, if the team, let's say we're on a 2-week cadence in Scrum, because that's typically the one that everybody comes to mind when we talk about time boxing, right? 2 weeks in Scrum, and every 2 weeks we go through a retro, and we're like, hey, so how'd you guys feel about that? And everybody's just like, I don't really know. We haven't really had much time to change anything. You probably don't need a retro every 2 weeks. Yeah, now, you might need, but so that falls on the practitioner to know, hey, my team is not responding to this. Now, if I need faster feedback, if I'm that practitioner, I'm going to have those conversations with you guys through the week. Hey, how's everything going? Everything cool? Relax, conversational. I'm still going back, taking notes and making improvements. But I know that I can't pull you guys into a room every 2 weeks for an hour to talk about your feelings. It's probably not going to work, right? But if I span it out, so now I give a little to get a little. Hey, we still got to do our retros. They're monthly.
Yep.
Everybody goes, okay, cool. Hey, in the event that something pops up, somebody say Peaches, we'll throw an emergency one on the board. All right, cool. That way people know that they can get to it quicker if they need. It's some people pull these frameworks out of the box and just run them specifically because, like we talked about, they're just handed that red Bible and said, do twice the work in half the time, and this is how you do it. And they read the first chapter and the last chapter and ignore all the inner workings of iterative work between it to make things make sense. And I think that's oftentimes the big misconception or the pain points that come through Agile is that it's kind of not truly Agile. Because it's waterfall attached to 2-week sprints. Which even in itself is still better than regular waterfall. Because the main issue with waterfall is that you go through design and build and test and deploy. And by the time that you've gotten to deploy, you're like, oh crap, like they don't want that and this is wrong. So at least if we're doing all those things in a 2-week fashion, we figure out we're wrong a little faster. That's worth it. That's valuable. But I mean, there's so many different flavors, so many different ways to do things. There's DA. I'm forgetting. I want to say it's discipline agile is what DA.
You said one thing that I think is interesting while you're looking that up. It falls on the practitioner. Yeah. And I agree with that 100%. Like, you're one of the few agile type practitioners that I actually respect.
Appreciate it.
Like, because like you said, they'll take this thing out of the box. Oh, I took a Scrum course, and they remove their ability to adapt. To the team. Like, you're preaching Agile to me, but you're not willing to adapt. Like, my team is at a deeper level of work point right now. Where these items that we're working on takes a longer amount of time. Okay, so having a retro, like you said, every 2 weeks is a little fast right now. That retro, which I think is extremely valuable in principle, needs to happen every, maybe like you said, 3 to 4 weeks. But I've been in conversations where I've had to like argue that point down because a practitioner is like, well, the Scrum guide says this,
and that's all right. Yeah, and I can't even I can't fault that practitioner for feeling that way, because technically speaking. And here's the difference between what's Agile and what's being done. We should be releasing code every 2 weeks.
Yeah, ideally, yeah.
If we're not releasing code, I don't think there's much to talk about. So that's just me putting my thinking cap on.
And that is 80% of teams.
Yeah.
That 80% of
that might be
teams
low.
I'm trying to be conservative.
That might be low.
I'm saying like it's probably more like 90% of teams are not releasing, even if they're following 2-week sprints.
No.
They're
Especially
not releasing every 2 weeks.
Especially in larger enterprises.
Even in a lot of modern enterprises. Like our release cycles are probably every 60 to 90 days. Like we have hot fixes and things like that. But they're probably more so every 60 to 90 days.
Yeah.
And there's certain things that may be released, but it's not sprint specific. It's not feature specific, right? So, but that's the detachment with the practitioner that doesn't understand really like software development and what the point is. The piece you just said, oh my God, clip it. That if you're deploying every 2 weeks, then we should have a retro every 2 weeks.
We got something to talk about.
If I'm hitting at the end of this sprint, we're saying push it all.
Yeah.
And my users are going to be using that software, 100% have the retro. If you're not though, which is the vast majority of the time, adapt to the work.
Now, what I'll also tell you, which I think you know, and is a larger scale reflection of the organization and not the practitioner, is that if I'm not holding retros every 2 weeks, they're going to start to wonder what I do here. Because one thing that I understand so well is that I don't hold any intrinsic value to this process. If you look at the triangle of a development team, you have the developers. They know the work. They know how to build the thing. The product owner knows what we're building. I'm purely here to make sure that y'all can talk in a way that makes sense. I don't know what we're building. I don't have the vision out in front. I don't know how to put my hands on the keyboard and do the thing. So if I'm not running these, we're talking about 10 to 20% of the team's time throughout a 2-week period if we're talking Scrum. So if I have a 4-hour planning, I have an hour for a retro. I get the PO and the stakeholders together for another hour in a refinement session. And I'm holding a 15-minute stand-up 10 times throughout a sprint. 15, that's an hour, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I've only worked for 8.5 hours in a 2-week sprint. So if I start chopping, exact meetings-wise, you're only seeing me for that. I don't hand anything in at the end of the sprint to say, this is where the other 32 hours were spent. So if you don't see me for one of those in a retro and I just have to cross it up, people are going to start wondering what I'm doing. So a lot of the concern of why these things are done sprintly, and a lot of that is just visibility for these Scrum Masters. Now, how I'm currently, and I'll say loudly currently, the position I'm in with my company, and now mind you, I'm not at the team level, I'm at the program level, right? So I'm working with my CIO. I have this whole portfolio under my hands. To that point, I work for him. I don't report to him. I'm part of a separate PMO that has Agile down to a science. And I work for a manager who has not only been an RTE, not only been a coach, he gets it and he's just willing to fight anybody over it. And he does not care. So when I walk into these places, I can make adjustments on the team and on the trains that I see fit because they trust me to make these decisions. And at the end of the day, my job is only to observe, report, and suggest. I can't force anybody to do anything. I can't force them to make these changes. But if I suggest this at the beginning of the PI, and they say, well, no, we don't think that's a good idea, or no, we're not going to show up to these meetings, or no, we don't need to have this retro every 2 weeks, that's fine. But when we get to metrics at the end of the quarter, and the CIO wants to know why we're red and why we have not improved anything, I can, with perfect cover of umbrella through my management and my PMO, go, the reason we're red is because we're not doing X, Y, Z. I suggested it at the beginning of the PI, and we never did it. And my job is not affected by it.
Yeah, those things being like meetings,
suggestions, the way that we pull in work. Because now that we jump into this specificity of what my role is or what a Scrum Master's role is, it's to put clean, burning fuel in front of the team. By the time work gets to you, you should know exactly what it is. You should know all the requirements. You should know everything you need to know. And that's only achieved through communication between you, the product owner, and the stakeholders.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you said that there's a visibility challenge.
People feel there is.
The practitioner feels there's a visibility challenge. What do I really do? I think there's a lot of other ways to gain visibility when it comes to working with these product teams. First of all, a lot of these Scrum Masters, if you're in a large organization, you have more than one product team you're working with.
Yeah.
So you have plenty of meetings to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, is that the best or not? I don't know, but it's happening. So you're busy.
Man,
okay.
a lot of these teams, your Scrum Master is your tester.
Yeah.
Your Scrum Master is your designer.
I agree. I think this, and I was getting to my other thing. If you're a Scrum Master on one team, you should be understanding the depth of work of what's being done in your engineering team, helping in whatever way. Like, I'll give you an example. So our company has a very specific RFC process where if something is new or being proposed, there's a document that's created, RFC or a request for comments or a PRD, like for higher level design stuff. And if something's new that we're doing or building, we write that. We would write that. And a big value add, in my opinion, of people who get their role as an Agile practitioner is helping the engineering side see when that should be happening.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hey, we're working on this thing. It's really cool and new. Should we bring this into an RFC? Like, should we do a PRD on this? And helping to facilitate the writing of that thing.
Yeah.
Okay? Because that's the stuff that gets bubbled up. Every company has their own version of stuff that gets bubbled up and then becomes standards. And then these standards can be communicated out. Like, if I'm an Agile practitioner, that's the stuff that I'm trying to have my name on.
Value through facilitation.
So you're facilitating that stuff. Now you're helping the engineers, because the engineer may not be thinking, oh, I need to put this into an RFC. Once they get used to it, they will be. But that's just because our company's so serious about it. A lot of companies, they're not thinking about documenting this. They're not in whatever your capacity is. So be an advocate of that, and not just an advocate and telling them to do it, but help them draft the document. Like, like get them on a call, right? And be like, hey, you had this great idea. I want to help, like, put some more legs around this. Let's draft this RFC. How would you describe it? Just write the description. Once that engineer's in that meeting for 10 minutes and they're like, oh, okay, now they're on the keyboard typing and filling out the document and you're not, right? But both of your names are in that document. Now you're saying, okay, let's keep adding to this over the next sprint. Now that visibility check up. So, hey, we've had, like in our case, these very big items that are new to the company. We've had to kind of reinvent the wheel a couple ways. This is why we are reinventing the wheel. We had to because of XYZ. And this is the reasons the team believes it. This is also the valuable work that's coming out of this that could be set as standards for other teams.
You're right.
But a lot of Agile practitioners aren't doing that. They're sitting there thinking, oh, man, they don't want me to do my meeting. Oh, well, my boss is going to wonder what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, if the boss doesn't understand the rest of it and the practitioner doesn't have the understanding to find value in other places, then you end up in that stalemate. I've always been the opposite. That's kind of how I found this. You remember we first started coding. I'm like, all right, I'm kind of bad at this and I don't really understand a whole lot of it. But our process is garbage. Let me just see how I can find other ways to be valuable. So personality types will always lend themselves to specific things. So if a person is looking to be found valuable, they'll find ways to be found valuable. That's why I always joke, I'm really bad at not doing anything and being seen not doing anything. You know, people, oh, look busy. I'm really bad at looking busy. I'd much rather just be busy.
No, I hate it, yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta actually be busy.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So to that point, there's so many things that an Agile professional should be doing that if they understand how it provides value, they will not be over the head of the team. But because a lot of leadership was forced into Agile, the leadership hired people that didn't quite understand Agile to kind of get up to speed faster. And now they have people overseeing teams that are supposed to be autonomous that don't understand how to enable a team. They just understand their previous managers, their previous project managers, their previous, we already talked about like product owners and how that's the person with the idea often gets forced into the role. And they're like, I don't want to do this. It's a whole different skill set that you should have if you're in the role. But to that point, if you're working as a Scrum Master, how do your metrics look before you hand them off? If I hand off quarterly metrics to the CIO, I can tell by our Sprintly metrics how things are going within this team.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm seeing these things and I have an understanding on like theory of teams, progression of law, like building teams and team dynamics, then I can go into these things and make shifts and changes to make sure we hit our number at the end of the time. But
Mm-hmm.
if I'm just focused on making sure the metrics look good so that I can keep my job,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm not going to truly improve the team. It's like we had a scrum master at a previous company. You ever see a burn down chart?
Yeah.
And how the burn down chart just like supposed to look like little steps, because in a perfect world, I'm picking up a task, I'm completing the task. I'm as they say, stop starting and start finishing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm picking up a task and I'm ending a task. What he would do is he would force all stories into these really tiny chunks. Now that's ideal. You want vertical slicing. You want to be able to thin the work out as much as possible so that you can reduce dependencies, you can reduce risk, and we have full view into the work so that if you tell me this is the size of the story, I look at the metrics and say these size stories typically take 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
At day 3, I'm going, hey, G, what's up? Everything okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had a cold. My mind was, it'll be done tomorrow. Cool. But I can start asking questions based on these things, based on what I see. So instead of just trusting that sometimes there were larger drops inside of it because of different things, he tried to game the system and slice it into these ridiculously short things just to appease a chart.
Yep.
And these are the things, because that's what you provide as value to your management. Hey, if you look at our burn down chart, the team is working on and completing. No one cares about that. All anybody cares about, which is the focus of Agile, which is why I know you don't hate Agile. Working software in people's hands.
Working software in people's hands.
Can we get that on a consistent basis? Now, and the term I've heard for years of the world that we live in currently is VUCA world.
I don't know.
You never heard the term VUCA? I want to make sure I get the actual acronym right, but I want to say VUCA stands for vulnerable, uncertain, changing, and ambiguous.
Yeah.
And let me just make sure. I'm close in thought, but not in words. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity.
Mm-hmm.
And from a technology perspective, that is the world we're in. Gone are the days of the machine mill manufacturing. I come in, punch a button, it does the thing. I go home and eat a sandwich. That's gone. The technology changes too fast. It's too volatile. We need to make sure we're moving, which is how Agile was birthed, to make sure it kept up with these changing requirements. When you get into that from a perspective of what you present in that constant change, that's why Agile's created to put the software in the hands of the user as fast as possible. Because I always liken it to cooking, right? There's nothing more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous than like making a dish that you've never made before, right? Let's say it's your wife's favorite dish. Like my wife loves chicken Alfredo, and let's say I've never made it before, right? I know how it's supposed to taste, but I don't know exactly how the measurements add up. So after I get done with the cheeses and the heavy cream and everything, and I start to go seasoning, what's the first thing I'm going to do?
Taste it.
I'm going to taste it. I'm going to pick up the spoon.
Yeah.
That needs a little pepper.
Only weirdos are not tasting their food after they make it.
Absolutely.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, it's serial killers.
Like if you're giving food to somebody and you haven't tasted it,
you don't care for them or yourself.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's big weirdo energy. But even to that point, if I'm making it for my wife, after I add that dash of pepper and then some salt, what's the next thing I'm going to do? Hey, hun, how does it taste? So that constant feedback, that intermittent feedback is what allows me to make changes based on the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous nature of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So it's the same reason that we have Agile. It's just that large enterprises are slow to change and they have to protect their assets in regards to that, like whip. Like, people call it the S curve. It's like my company still uses Skype and WebEx.
Yeah.
And pains.
Yeah.
It's a big pain. But our company is the third largest or second largest bank in the entire world with over 100, over 60 countries that we're doing business in. So if they just make a major shift and change to all of these employees over all these different companies, it's going to be a heck of a whip that comes along on that.
It's a lot, yeah.
Exactly. So oftentimes they're going to be on the back end of that curve. We can't innovate because innovation might mean too much to too many things.
Yeah. No, I get it. I think I agree with all those things as far in the principles you said. And that's the thing about Agile is I never disagree with the principles. The brass tacks, tangible things that are issues is just the practitioners aren't good.
That's all.
like the practitioners, they aren't very good, or they don't understand what their job really is based on those principles.
People take this. If I could take a 3-day course to be a software engineer, and people would hire me the next week, I'd be really bad at that too.
Yeah.
Or if I could be a designer and take a 3-day course and they would let me change cloud code or change cloud settings right after that, there's going to be a large learning gap. And the issue that comes with Agile practitioners, specifically at the Scrum Master level, is that they stop looking for information after that course.
Yeah. Stop learning.
You stop learning.
You can't do that.
You're held into these old standards. You create boxes and patterns for your team that you feel like help your team, and you stop doing the one thing that is your actual job. Finding new ways to promote and open and fast and flow through the system and get work out. Because people just get comfortable. That's just the nature of life. It's like, people, they're doing their stories. They said they had 40 story points. We did all 40 story points. This team is good. Yeah, but can it be better? Is there like a personal relationship between Jimmy and Sally that we can fix? And maybe that 40 points turns to 45 or 50 because now they're actually talking to each other. Yeah. Are the requirements good, but they could be better? And you could stop calling the product owner every other day to figure out what the heck they mean by this. And now we can get to 60 points. That's how the role of any Agile practitioner at any level is to improve the system and improve flow.
And maybe a third of all of the practitioners are that.
Absolutely.
Maybe a third.
We have a term at the bank, professional scrum masters.
Yeah.
Isn't that a crazy thought? That because for us, our scrum masters sit underneath tech managers. They don't necessarily sit. We're trying to change that, but they don't sit under our PMO for the RTEs and the coaches sit.
Okay.
So a tech manager will come to me and go, "Hey, I need a scrum master." And I'll go, cool. Sometimes I'll have a whole bunch of resumes or people who I know, and they'll go, hey, I need a professional scrum master. Well, what does that mean? Like, were you not planning to pay the other people?
That's what the cert is called, isn't it?
Yeah, PSM.
I think it's called professional scrum master.
They don't mean the cert. They just mean, I need somebody who does this, not somebody who does another thing and has a certification.
Gotcha.
I need someone, and just the distinction between that never occurred to me, because once I went Agile, it was no other. I wasn't interested in much else, but I was also fueled through the information. Like I'm still reading. I have 4 pictures on my phone. Each picture has about 12 books on it. Over the last month, I've just been knocking off books because ones are related to Agile mindsets. There's another page or picture that's full of books on increasing my technical knowledge. So that way I can talk to developers and kind of understand half the crap they're saying. There's one on coaching specifically, not necessarily at the team level, but once you grow into the enterprise level. There's the last one I'm pretty sure is facilitation. Just purely, it doesn't matter what, if you're in that role or you're in another role, but just how to facilitate discussion, how to pull conversation out. One of my favorite books that I want to reread, I believe they offer courses based on the on the book. It's called Teaching from the Back of the Room. And when you understand those 4 major things of how Agile works, how to coach it, because even Scrum Masters are team coaches, how to coach it, with a wee bit of technical knowledge. You don't really need a whole bunch of it, but just enough not to get your head in weeds. And then how to facilitate discussion. Mainly that 4th thing. Because if you facilitate discussion well, that's where the value in communication comes. And people will no longer wonder what you do here, because they'll come to you first. Hey, I want to have a conversation. Can you schedule it? Not because you're a secretary, but because you pull meaningful points out of discussion. You're aware of the work screen. It's like, my mentor says you earn a little street cred by understanding the product and what's going on from a tech perspective. And that's what draws the value from a practitioner. If we had 2/3 of Agile practitioners who did that,
that'd be nice.
You would not feel the way
that'd
that you
nice.
feel currently.
I wouldn't. I've faced a lot of meh.
Yeah.
But it's fine. Like I think that the good ones are worth their weight in gold.
Yeah.
And the bad ones just like cause a really bad name for everybody.
There's no other profession in tech that you could just be pure, unadulterated mid at and nobody would know. Like you can't be a mid designer because they're like, hey man, these designs kind of suck.
These are whack.
These are whack. Get back to it, and you get back to it. You're like, yo, these suck too. Like you can't be a mid coder because people are like, hey man, stuff keeps breaking.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to fly under the radar.
Yeah, which is why a lot of people run to it. And I used to take large offense to that. People are like, I don't want to do anything. I'll just become a scrum master. And I'm just like, all right, go right ahead and have to deal with a Gerald on your team and see how much longer you want to do this thing.
Yeah, those I think I made mid Agile practitioners feel very bad about themselves.
Yes.
And I'm not proud of it, but I don't feel bad about it.
Would you make a mid software developer feel the same way?
A mid software developer?
Yeah.
Here's the difference is I know if they're junior or I know if they're mid-level or I know if they're senior.
But and
I treat all of them according to the knowledge that they have. The thing about Agile is like it's this weird hybrid between sales and technical because you're masquerading as if you know.
Facts.
That's my entire problem.
But the bigger issue, there's no junior scrum master role out there.
No, I get that. But you're masquerading as if you know. Ask a question.
Humility.
Like, that's fine.
Another check. We should put like a bingo card.
And yes, to answer your question, if I have a dev, a mid-level or whatever, if I'm as a senior dev and I'm working with a mid-level or junior, and they are masquerading as if they know, yes, they're going to feel very badly about themselves. Yeah. And it's not even going to be because I'm trying. It's just going to be because our conversation is going to highlight how much you don't know.
We're going to keep running the brick walls throughout this conversation.
And this is going to become frustrating for you.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to ask you questions and you're not going to be able to answer them. So on the Agile side, it's just worse. It's more obvious that you just are saying you're masquerading as if you know and you clearly don't. And that's fine. It's actually okay. I'm of the opinion. Okay. I'm not as much of a jerk when it comes to as some devs who is like, I expect you to know all the things. I don't expect you to know all the things. I expect you to have some self-awareness about what you don't know.
All right. First off, the word master and scrum master gives off a crazy bit of responsibility and authority that we just don't have.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you remember a discussion that happened years ago at this point where a scrum master just kind of like flat out said something like kind of disrespectful to another person. And that person got really upset about that thing and talking to one of the admin assistants. And they said, well, don't you just kind of have to do what they said? We were just like, no, like not even a little bit. What are you talking about? She said, yeah, but he's a scrum master. Isn't he like a manager? And I'm like,
not at all.
No. But to that point, I have all the responsibility of management and none of the authority of it. Yeah. So you get put in this really weird position to where for whatever, I don't know if it's the title, what people been told, just not understanding the role, people they see servant leader, they look to scrum master as like a form of management. Like because you're management and you're in this position, you need to know. And then people are just like, well, because I'm in this role, I can't tell them I don't. So it's a weird between the issue. Now, humility will reign supreme. You'll be able to say, that's why when on the first day when I started with Apple, I'm 18 years old. Mm-hmm. I'm about to work in their store. The first thing they teach you is this phrase: I don't know. Let's find out together.
Boom.
No is not an option in Apple's retail stores. Like literally, that you want to talk about calls for discussion. Mm-hmm. If somebody tells like, hey, do you know about that? No, I don't know. One of your managers hear that? Hey, can we talk? Not acceptable. But let's find out together, or I'll chase that down and come back to you because we just counted the hours I'm required to be in meetings and we know I have a lot of free time here. I'll figure it out. But a lot of people would rather just not admit they don't know.
Yeah, stop that. Okay,
I think that's
stop
but you see the unfair pedestal that at times can be created for people in this role.
I think those pedestals exist in all over the place.
Absolutely,
like in many different ways, and this is a fundamental human thing.
Mm-hmm.
that you just have to learn, which is not only is it possible for you to be wrong, it's most likely you're going to be wrong. So some people can't even acknowledge it's a possibility, let alone that it's likely.
Yeah.
In a scrum and a facilitation role where your biggest job is to listen and convey the message of other people, not your own message.
Yeah.
You are literally the middleman between everyone.
You're so the middle person. Like
you are not even paid to have your own thoughts, really.
No, all right. So
very little of your, like, okay, 90% of the job is I'm paid to understand and convey other people's thoughts.
That's it. 90's probably low too. But
like, I'm just saying, conservative 10%, your own creativity. So if you can't, in your brain.
I was coaching a product owner who had never been in this role before, right? Mm-hmm. And she was dealing with an Agilist who like just would constantly give her own opinions about a situation. And like oftentimes I talk and work through it. Now here's an interesting caveat to as a Scrum Master or as an Agile coach. Oftentimes, let's say I'm a full-time employee and we're having a contractor in the role. I am limited in how I can interact with that person. It's a little different than like let's say like you're a senior dev and you have a junior dev who's a contractor. That conversation is very straightforward and to the point because it's just like, hey man, your code sucks. This is how we fix it. Let's get it together. Because that's not improving, changing, or directing how they work. We're not educating or anything. When you get into co-employment laws as an Agile coach, it gets weird because I can only instruct you to a certain degree before I breach over into education and treating you like an employee. And as a coach, I've seen that happen multiple times. Now we're getting calls from recruiting companies like, hey, I heard you had a discussion with my contractor. It's weird, right? So in this situation, I'm literally at a nonprofit event that I was excused for the day, and like my phone is just blowing up on Teams. I need to talk to you right now. I said, hey, what's up? She goes, we're in a product release. We have, let's say, 8 devs. The devs, 7 of the 8 devs say, we can't push this as it is. We need 1 more week. I look at what they've given me and I go, yeah, that's fine. We have the bandwidth to take the extra week. We're going to take it. The Scrum Master is just like, well, I don't think that we should. And they were like, why? Well, I just think that we can kind of just band together and get it out a little faster. There's no reason we should like fully, I guess they had like a few more days before they actually missed the commitment. I don't see why we couldn't get the commitment if we just worked a little harder, came together now.
Okay.
And one of the developers was just like, do you have a say here? And that completely sparked like a whole, and then the product owner was just like, I don't know that you do, but I also am not sure exactly how this worked. And then that went into like a huge blow up of argument in between these two people.
That's a very clear answer. No,
absolutely.
Like, but it goes back to even a question.
It goes back to the first thing I said. As the person who's not building the code or setting the roadmap, what value from a knowledge perspective do I have here outside of previous engagements that I've watched people who knew the work and had the roadmap? That's all I give here.
That's see. This is
that's the type of stuff that you would have flew off in the
your
handle
opinion.
In the middle of the
like I would have probably done what that dev did and just asked, like,
you don't have a say.
Does
here.
your opinion matter? Like, with the dev said no.
There's no like nice way to
like. That's
that
one of the most
either.
frustrating things when you're on the dev team and your dev starts telling you, "Hey, this timeline isn't good," and they did you a favor, by telling you 3 days in advance. By the way, okay, because there's dev teams that get scared.
Yeah.
They tell you the day before, and that's not ideal.
No.
So they were preemptive, it sounds like, and saying, or proactive and saying, hey, we have 3 days. This work isn't looking good, right? That should be, thanks for telling me.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
You want to know now or
yeah,
2 weeks?
Thanks for telling me. That gives us time to mitigate whatever we need to mitigate on the other side. This Scrum Master coming out and say, I think we could do it. What exactly are you doing?
Yeah, on what basis?
Wait.
What
are you doing?
See, now we get back to that original question.
What are you? No. We got 3 days.
Yeah.
You're saying we can band together.
Yeah. What's your band?
What
here?
banding are you doing?
Yeah.
Wait. Are you good? So You're gonna just log in and
Hands on
like
keyboard.
write this feature.
Hands on keyboard.
You're gonna write this feature with me. No? Okay. What are you like? This is one of the most profound skills. Everyone listening, please pipe in for this one. This is the most profound skills in corporate anything. Understanding when to be quiet.
Yeah.
Okay? Just understand that was a
Yeah.
perfect opportunity
Yeah.
for the Scrum Master to just be quiet.
Just be quiet.
That's all you had to do. You could have disagreed. You could be like, I feel like the devs, they're maybe not doing what they're supposed to do. We could knock this out. You could have that feeling.
Yeah.
Feel that feeling. Be quiet.
I'm guilty of the exact opposite of that thing, right? To the point to where I've had leadership come to me like, and it's funny because we'll have OG on the podcast, but OG came to me with just like, hey man, stop letting them do your job. And I said, no, I'm not. But some people feel the need to speak constantly so that their intellect is put on Front Street and their value is seen by all.
Okay.
Those people will often talk themselves right out of the place they wish to put themselves.
Very annoying. Yeah.
Happens way too often. If I jump in that arena with that person, especially when I know what the end result is, my message gets lost in translation. I'm not quiet because I don't know what's going on. I'm not quiet because I'm passive. I'm quiet because I'm allowing time for the true result to come forth.
Yeah, I love that. I'm quiet because I'm listening.
That's it.
That's what the thing is. If you're feeling anxious, right, and other people are talking around you, people are doing you the massive benefit of telling you their thoughts and feelings and opinions. You don't know how to move yet until you listen.
It's that simple.
So if I'm sitting there and I'm quiet, because you've been in meetings with me, and I'm quiet and I talk. I do both. I can do both. Yeah, sitting? I'm just sitting because I'm genuinely, intensely listening, because I assume there's something that I could be missing.
Yeah.
Now there's been a lot of meetings where there may have been something I was missing. I was like, that's a great point. We should incorporate that. Boom. There's been a lot of meetings when I listen and I'm like, no.
This is all wrong.
That's incorrect. Here's why. And we can talk about it, right? But if I was going to be jumping in or talking or not understanding my domain as a technical professional and dipping into the domain of the business past like very basic interactions, right? Like if I'm like, hey, Mr. Product Owner, like, I don't think that user story should be that way. Were you in the meeting with the user? Like, this is what they said.
Exactly.
Like, if I was in the meeting because they wanted my opinion in there, okay, fine.
It's different.
But if I'm not even in the meeting with the user in the first place, and there's been a lot of times where I've been both. I've been in the meeting with the user or not. I'm just giving an example. Yeah. But know when your expertise is needed. Absolutely. And when you should be speaking, when you should be listening. It's something that should be practiced, right? But in the Scrum Agile type role is extremely critical because your entire value prop, is how you do that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and that'll change how your team integrates you, because unfortunately, what the opposite of that is, which happened to a team I took over, is it's like, you ever read Dave Marquette's Turn the Ship Around? Mm-mm. It's about a Navy captain who trained for 1.5 years to take over a certain boat or a certain ship.
Okay.
And then like 2 weeks before he was supposed to take over that ship, they're like, nah, we need you to take over this ship. It takes 1.5 years for me to learn all the protocols, what we have on board, the people we have on board, those things. You just switch it. So if I'm trying to make calls on this thing and this new ship, I'm going to sink us all. We're going to do something stupid. But these people have been working on this ship for years. So if I trust them to have the information and the knowledge, then you move forward with that perspective, right? So it's the same thought to where one of the things he said was, if you're the guy with all the answers, you can never go home to have a meal. So at all times,
I love that.
I'm trying to be the exact opposite of that person. Yeah. I try to spread the information, try to make it readily accessible, because I was joining a team where their scrum master, who had no technical expertise, was just constantly recommending stuff. No, we should do it that way. No, we should build it this way. No, we should use that, because he's trying to build his resume up to put himself on a different pedestal. And then he gets moved to the place he wants to be. I take over the team, and we can't have a meeting without going, hey, call bruh. He said we should do this. Now he's trying to do his new thing, but he can't have his meal. He can't do the next thing because he's constantly getting pulled back because he wanted to be the simple or the one source of truth and decision making for this team. Not only is that not your job as a scrum master, but it's bad business practice for anyone in any of these roles, whether you're an architect, a dev, a product owner, anybody.
Yep.
People push into these information silos because they feel it makes them more valuable. Yeah. And it does, but the point of diminishing returns it comes around very, very, very quickly. Where it's just like, hey, we need Gerald for everything. And then you're just like, they need me for
Yeah, everything. I never did any of my teams like that. I hate doing it. I never wanted to be the first thing you do when you establish a team is establish someone who could act as a senior lead. And by senior lead, I'm simply just mean the ability to make technical decisions. Mm-hmm. And over the first month or two of that project, yes, they would verify those big technical decisions with me. We would discuss them. But even in those discussions, I'm talking to them and asking them questions to give them the tools of how to use deductive reasoning to make that on their own.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm just honestly serving more so as a sounding board. Now, there's a couple times, where you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. And I'm glad you came to me because don't do that thing.
Absolutely.
But that happened pretty rare if you have people that are remotely competent, which most people are. And it serves you well to kind of assume that they know enough to reason. Okay?
Absolutely.
And that way now these teams, outside of me having to pop in for a retro on the team or having to pop in for like a stand-up here and there when a specific technical topic has been brought up, they're good. Mm-hmm. They're now self-sufficient. It takes me a month or so to get them there, and then once they're there, they're cooking. If you're not making teams that way and trying to educate them to be self-sufficient, and even as a scrum master, try to facilitate them to be able to participate in the Agile process as very active individuals, I think you're making a huge mistake because of what you just said.
Absolutely.
Anyway. All right, we're at like an hour and 48 minutes. We want to keep this. I'll try to keep this under 2 hours.
I was honestly thinking we split this in at 2, but
yeah, we could honestly on this topic we could definitely keep going because I want to get into future stuff on what exactly those metrics are that bubble up. Like I think we should just do a whole video on that. I know a lot of people that are interested in that.
I'm with it.
Anyway, thank y'all so much for joining. We appreciate it. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. If you made it this far, you're probably subscribed anyway. If not, but go ahead and do it.
We love you.
Thank y'all again. Love you guys. Bye.
Bye.